Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Binance podcast. My name is Wei Zhou. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Binance. So what I want to do with this show is to spend time talking to specialists, entrepreneurs, scholars, influencers, basically leading people from a variety of industries. Hopefully, through these conversations, we can share insights on how blockchain is changing not just these different industries, but also in changing the world. Here's a quick disclaimer. All opinions expressed by our host and our guests on this podcast are merely their own opinions. They do not imply any endorsements or opinions of their companies. You should not take these opinions as specific investment advice, as you will be solely responsible for your own investment. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Binance podcast. This is Wei, and today I'm actually super excited to join my friend and then my current colleague, Nischal Shetty, who is the CEO and founder for WazirX, the largest P2P exchange in India. I actually met Nischal when I actually led the acquisition of WazirX by Binance. You know, we worked on that deal for a couple of months, and then have been working more closely the last few months since the closing, and then leading to the IEO, the initial exchange offering on Binance for the WazirX token, which has performed quite well since the IEO, demonstrating sort of the, not necessarily demand, but more about sort of the market's interest in the Indian marketplace. So today, I'm really happy to have Nischal on the Binance podcast. Nischal, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Wei. Thanks for having me on the show.
We'll get started. We basically have the guests to come in to introduce themselves a little bit in terms of, you know, what's their background, how did they get into crypto. So it would be wonderful to sort of learn about your background from a personal and professional basis.
You know, I started my career as a software engineer. I think that's one of the most common professions in India. So nothing special out there. I just graduated from engineering college, got into a job. And a couple of years into that, I realized that, you know, it was a typical corporate job. I realized I wasn't cut out for that. The excitement wasn't enough for me. So I ended up joining a startup in India. And about a year and a half into that, I built my own product. It was more of a side project, a social media management app, which took off. It got profiled on TechCrunch on the 4th day of launch. And from there, it just took off, making me quit my job eventually and to go full time with that. Then I grew that business, raised some venture capital, about $2.5 million, scaled it further. And around this time, a lot of stuff was happening in the whole decentralization space and crypto. And that's when, you know, we can go deeper in the conversation ahead. But that's when I got into this whole crypto sector and decided to build WazirX. So yeah, I'm an engineer by profession. Now I'm turned into an entrepreneur. I've been, you know, into crypto now around 2.5 years, full time into the whole crypto space.
Yeah. What was it like to start to build your own business, like from just like a professional, like, you know, working for someone to basically building a product from scratch and then launching it and then seeing it getting traction? What was that like? This was probably like, you're pretty young back then, right? Like just a couple of years out of college.
Yeah, I think I was 24 when this happened. So the idea was not to see, I think there are always these two set of thoughts. People who say, I want to build something on my own, and then they start doing it. In my case, I was pretty active online as a blogger back then. I used to blog a lot about different products. And I saw an opportunity in building a social media management software back then. It was very early days. Twitter had just come up with their API. It was like, I think the Twitter API was just 6 months old. Apps were like really being built on top of it.
Was the product then to serve sort of the Indian market, or is it to serve the global market?
No, it was a global product. Anyone could use it because Twitter was a global platform. So anyone in the world could use it. The idea was that people wanted to really grow fast on Twitter back in the day. I think even now they want to grow fast, but back then I had built quite a few features into the product which helped people grow organically. So a lot of people started, you know, using the app. In fact, Michael Arrington was one of the first people to use it, and he profiled it on TechCrunch when he personally used the product. And that's what gave us like the jump start, I would say. It was still my day job. Even though it got profiled on TechCrunch, I was like, you know, fine, people build products, they get featured, nothing big. And so the thought was not to quit. The thought was to just continue doing this as a part-time Saturday, Sunday, weekend kind of a thing. But after about 8 months in, it reached a point where it had, I think, 200K users, and it was paying me more in a month than my job was paying me in a year. And so that, I would say, that was the point where I said, probably I should go full time. And
You go beyond your break even point at that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was more organic for me rather than saying let's quit and start something. I just
So
got into this organic.
I mean, that's actually pretty amazing though. So were you physically in India then? Because that's pretty amazing that you're actually serving a global audience on social media for a social media app, a tool, but you're running that operation out of India.
Yeah, I was out of India, and this product was one of those few from India, because most of the startups in 2010-11 started focusing on the Indian market because it was just growing. But I think mine was one of those few global products from India. Yeah, it was an interesting. But I think always been a product first kind of a guy. So this exposure gave me the opportunity to understand what's the best way to build a product at a global scale. So yeah, I think good things happened.
From our conversations, you're actually a very well-traveled person. Like you spent quite a bit of time in the US, and you spent quite a bit of time in Latin America as well.
Yeah, after I quit my job, I still wasn't sure whether I should hire more people. And that's when I came across this opportunity in Chile, which was called Startup Chile. It was a very new program. In fact, I was part of the first batch of this experiment that they started, where the idea was to invite 100 entrepreneurs from around the world to Chile so that they could foster an ecosystem for startups in the country. And I applied, and they liked what I was building, so they called me on. So I spent about 6 months there, learned a bit of Spanish, but I think what I learned more was the whole different perspective that people are from around the world gotten at that one single place. You're meeting 100 people from every country and every continent that you can think of. So that was an amazing experience, and that actually started my quest for travel, because I realized that when you're traveling, you're meeting new people with new culture and new mindsets. And that helps you understand what's the right way to build products for a global audience. And since I was building for a global audience, I thought traveling was important. And yeah, that's how it happened. And then eventually, I think for 3 years in a row, I spent about 3 to 6 months in San Francisco. And that, again, I think San Francisco is like that melting pot of different cultures and different thoughts. So that helped a lot. I think I owe a lot to travel in terms of my perspectives of, how to build products for the world, how people think in different regions around the world.
Okay. How did you evolve from the previous product then into Wazir? Because I think a lot of it probably overlaps with your journey into Bitcoin or into crypto in general.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think my journey has been so organic. It's never been like, let's do this. Since I built on top of these social networks around 2017, these social networks had become so big, and most of them had gone public. They had to focus on the revenues rather than just the experience for their users. And that's when they started cutting off access to their APIs for all these third parties, including my product that I had built. This is the time I realized that when they were growing, they used the developer ecosystem to grow. And when it came time for them to monetize, they were not shying away from cutting off this very developer ecosystem that they had fostered. The reason they could do this is because they had the control. And that's when, me being a developer, I came across the whole blockchain space. And I realized that if I was to build something on top of blockchain, no one could come and tell me not do this or that. I could build it the way I wanted. And that was like that, defining moment, saying, what was I doing in this centralized ecosystem when there's an entire decentralized ecosystem out there. And that's how I got into crypto. I still didn't know what to build. I just knew that, this is an amazing world where developers...
Around when was this? This is like 3 years ago, 2016, 17-ish?
Yeah. The end of 2016, like it all started in December 2016, Jan 2017.
Okay. So you basically got burned by Twitter.
Exactly.
Right? And you realize like, holy crap, the centralized system sucks. Decentralization is way better.
Yeah, it was not just Twitter, even Instagram. The funny thing is, if it was just one platform, you would say that's probably a blip in the whole grand scheme of things. But even Instagram did the exact same thing, by the way. They cut off quite a few APIs, and they keep doing that every 6 months. It's a general trend in the centralized ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, and you started exploring, I think, sort of decentralization and blockchain.
Yeah, and I got into, like, at the beginning, I had quite a, the thing is, once you get into blockchain, and, this is like still fresh in my mind, a new person who gets in, there are like 10,000 possibilities in your mind when you look at the blockchain ecosystem. It's so new. It's just coming up. You're like, I can build this, that, and everything else around under the roof. Then I realized that, you have to focus and build what is needed today rather than building what might be needed 5 or 10 years down the line. I had a lot of projects back then, the whole ICO madness that was happening. I saw a lot of them to be too futuristic for, the present. So I looked at what can I build? And since I had the experience of building global products, I wanted to this time build something for the local market. And around this time, the prices of Bitcoin was like skyrocketing. So I tried buying some Bitcoin, and Indian sites were the only way you could do it because you wanted to buy it with fiat, your INR.
Yep.
And when I used these products, and since I've been traveling, I've also used global products. So when I used the local exchanges and compared them to the global ones, I realized that the product experience lacked. It wasn't up to the mark at all, not even like 50% of what you saw globally. And that's when I realized that if we wanted to get the adoption of blockchain and crypto in India, the first entry point, which is how do you go from being a no coiner or only fiat to crypto, was exchanges. And if that product was bad, how can India with such a large audience ever get onto the whole decentralization ecosystem? And that motivated me saying that, let's build the same global experience that everyone around the world is experiencing in fiat to crypto for India. And that's how we launched WazirX. Eventually, I think the idea took shape in December 2017, but we launched on March 2018.
What was sort of like against that whole backdrop of WazirX launching and then sort of gaining traction is sort of what's going on in the larger market in India, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of interesting stuff. When we launched, so when we decided that we would launch, the bull market was at its peak. And when we were launching, the bear market was just starting in March, I think. And while that was fine because we didn't get in with the price as our motive, but decentralization and crypto, the Indian Central Bank, which is the RBI, they came up with a circular just 3 weeks into our launch saying very soon crypto exchanges will not be able to use bank accounts in India. They prohibited every exchange. And while that might have been like a moment to just give up, I said this is something I've faced before, like centralized entities coming up with their own set of rules. So I said we need to find a better way to not be like going out of business just because your bank account stops. What can we do? And that's when we realized that a peer-to-peer way for fiat transfer can also be built. And then we launched WazirX P2P, which actually gave us the breakthrough in India. So if you think about it, the adversity that the Indian crypto space faced, we converted that into an opportunity.
But what happened to the exchanges that had existed before then? The ones that were connected to the banks, like are they still around? Like from my understanding, like India was actually pretty active, right? Some of these exchanges were actually pretty sizable.
Yeah, so they had to, I think 2 of the largest exchanges had to shut down after this whole banking restriction came into place. I would simply say it's because they did not innovate. All they had to do was be fast and look at what the situation was and come up with a solution, which they failed to do. Us being new and nimble, I think we could really adapt to those changing conditions. And if you look at it, that's how it's always been in the crypto, in a startup space in general, that companies come up, they don't really transform themselves to the situations, and then some other player comes in and becomes bigger than them. That's always been the case. Social networks, search, everything. So I think in crypto we've been able to do that in India. So that's good.
Tell me a little bit about your product then. Like, there's a couple of things that I was really impressed by when I first started looking at it. One is basically how well sort of your product rated, especially on the app side. Because I think a lot of the exchanges out there, they're still predominantly like Web 1.0. It's still like a website-based kind of business, right?
Absolutely. So before we were launching, the surprising thing was there was no exchange which had its presence on all the platform. Like either they had a website, no mobile app, or a mobile app, no website. So, and in crypto, if you realize, people, you don't have a choice on when you will trade. The markets can change in the night. You're traveling, you're sleeping, you need a desktop. You're traveling, you need a phone. So we said we would build it on all platforms, but our focus was always mobile, because India is predominantly a mobile first country. We have skipped the whole desktop revolution. We have onboarded ourselves to the mobile revolution. So we knew that if we had to focus hard on one platform, that would be mobile. While desktop app is amazing as well, but mobile was something that was like the first focus. And that proved out right, because when we were launching, we looked at how the other mobile apps were. Nobody had an amazing rating. And that's simply because you don't focus on the product. People are not going to love it. You need to love your product first. So we said we will build something that we love, and that's when people started taking notice, and the way people started rating it. I would say all that someone had to do was give a better experience, and we did that for the Indian market. Nothing magical. It's just hard work and I think focus on what you want.
Did your previous experience working on the previous platform, right, the social marketing platform, how did that play into the building and then the marketing for Wazir? Because one of the things the second thing that I really noticed was when we started talking to you is basically you've been on Twitter every day for almost a year and a half now. It's like that persistence. It's pretty amazing.
I think first thing, the experience of having built a product already, like our previous app, it's got over 5 million downloads on mobile. So there's a lot of experience gained from that. That really helped in not repeating the same mistakes. But talking about persistence, I think I've been an entrepreneur for now, I think 7-8 years now. What I've realized that you might have great ideas, great products, and great everything, but if you're not persistently, focused, and if you're not persistent in your work, you will never succeed. And when this whole banking regulation, the banking restriction came in, I realized that someone had to take the call that we will fight for crypto in India. And I started that. To be honest, I never thought that I would have to tweet every day. It's 475 days now since I've been tweeting every day to our government. I really thought it might be like a week or two before somebody replies, or maybe it'll all be good. But the path is really not easy, I think, towards these things, because it's regulation. Governments can't take decisions when they'll have to be slow. So I think it's been continuing, and now it's become a habit. Now I'm afraid, what happens when India opens up? I need to stop tweeting that.
You need to find a new cause.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you actually talk a little bit about the WRX coin thing?
See, I think one of the biggest differences I've seen in the whole centralized versus decentralized ecosystems is that your centralized ecosystems always benefited the founders and probably the employees and the investors, but never the user base. You look at the whole decentralized ecosystem, you realize that the user ecosystem, the user base, is in a position to benefit from the success of the products that they use, and then they share with their friends. And this use case, I think, is in fact one of the killer use cases of crypto, which is involve your audience in the growth of your product, and let them also benefit from that. Not just use them and throw them away, but let them benefit from that. And this is where I realized that as an exchange also, we have to involve our audience. And the best way was to have a native exchange token. And I think back when we were doing, I think BNB was probably the only one which has proven that this is something that will definitely work if you involve your community. So took cue from Binance and said, if they've been doing it at a global scale, can we do this at the local scale in India? Because India is a large market. And we launched WRX. The core idea is that the biggest use case is trading fee discounts. And because it's limited in nature, as the exchange grows, as India opens up, this token will be one of the most probably popular tokens. It's already popular in India. I think as this ecosystem grows, I want the early adopters to benefit, and WRX is the best way for them to benefit. If they hold it, great. If they use it, they can use it on the exchange. That's great for them. So that was the thought process. Very simple. Involve the community.
How did the community earn WRX? Did they have to buy it, or like what was the? Because I think what's really unique about the WRX is actually basically you built it native into the trading platform from day one.
Right. So when we were launching, the ICO craze had fizzled out by that time. But irrespective, we knew that we could build a early version without having to raise capital, and we were doing that. But we wanted to make sure that we give WRX to our users in the right way. So the first way we did it was simply you could register, sign up, and you would be able to get WRX reserved for you. And after that, we brought in quite a few ways in which people could earn WRX. See, the way I see this is that you cannot employ 100,000 people in a startup on day one, but through your tokens, you can actually employ them in an indirect way, which was reward them. So we rewarded people for inviting their friends. We rewarded them for trading. We rewarded them for referrals. So we rewarded them in different ways. Then we had competitions where we rewarded with WRX. And the best thing was the ones who believed in it, I think they're very, very happy about it today, that they were the early adopters. And this somewhere, this comes from my own experience. I've been an early adopter of quite a few products, which went on to be big or acquired, but I never got the advantage of being the early movers in those products because they were like, the Web 2.0. I think Web 3.0 rewards the early adopters.
We announced our transaction. I think we announced or Binance announced the partnership with WazirX in around November. And then we've been basically working nonstop in terms of products, features, and a lot of that work culminated in the IEO for the token earlier this month in February. What's your biggest takeaway from that experience so far in terms of actually seeing your token to be traded on Binance and actually to be extremely positively well received? Because I think this is the second major token to come out of India, right? The first one is Matic, and the second one is not WRX. Like, what has that been like in terms of just seeing that excitement, I think, in the Indian crypto community now? Like, even more so, I would say, than when Matic came out.
Yeah, it's been overwhelming, I would say. I never expected for WRX to be this well received. I never expected, beyond my imagination. But when I look back now, I think it's expected, considering first thing, Binance acquired WazirX. And, Binance has such an amazing ecosystem. So which now we have access to as a Indian exchange. We have access to the Binance ecosystem. So India is a sleeping giant. It's right there. It's just about 5 to 7 million people in India today into crypto, but there's the potential for 100 million or 200 million people to be in it over a period of time. So all of these people, when I've been talking to them, they're the most excited about. First is how can they help crypto grow in India, which is very, very motivating for me to hear from people around the world who are trusting WRX today. And then the second is, people realize that if India opens up, WRX is going to be that default exchange token here. So I think these are the two important factors that motivates people the most. And the fact that we've not been like a traditional, just another exchange. We've always tackled the regulatory environment and built the right kind of, I would say, solutions for the Indian market. So that speaks a lot about us not being here just for today. We're building for a future in India, and we've been like doing that consistently from 2 years. So I think what helped for WRX is the fact that we didn't just go out and ICO'd. We first built the product, built a revenue, even got acquired, and now we are going with an IEO on Binance, which I think proves that the team is not just like a new let's build a team together, let's ICO, but a team which has proven itself. So I think that was like a very important factor in the success.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest takeaway is that, I think we're actually doing a huge amount of service, right? Because I think you'll remember around the time when we first started, when we met, there was actually quite a large amount of FUD going around about how India is banning crypto, or even saying that it's banned in India, so there's no ownership. And then what I found was really interesting is that this iteration is we actually did a great job of educating the world about sort of the state of the crypto market in India.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now I think, and it's hard because, the FUD is created by a lot of, I would say, misinformation in the media. And for us to dispel that, it's never easy because we're just one voice out here. So this whole fact that when WRX launched, a ton of people started researching and they started questioning if you're in India, how are you in India operating when we hear that it's banned? So this, what you said is on point, that the WRX has absolutely helped bust the myth of Bitcoin or crypto being banned in India. It's not banned in India. And now I see a lot of people talking about clarity. They talk about the fact that it's not banned in India. People are using WazirX P2P and it's just a banking restriction, nothing more than that. So yeah, WRX has helped a lot in, I think dispelling all the FUD around crypto in India.
Yeah, and then the second major one is that I think is actually the community is actually just starving for they're just walking through the desert and just like starving for anything that is fresh and innovative and fun and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, we are all here to build the ecosystem, and I think for us, it's an opportunity I've never seen before, because in the traditional internet, it was all done when a lot of us became entrepreneurs and started building stuff. And in this decentralized world, we are probably the early movers, and it's fine. I think someone has to give something positive to the market, and I'm glad that with WazirX we've been able to do that in India.
Yeah, the last bit of news is I think something that you guys, the WazirX, has actually been providing a lot of support for was actually the Supreme Court case, right? I don't know who, but I think the people actually took the RBI to court to question their ban on crypto, right? That was the court case that took place, I think, a month ago.
Yeah, so after this court case was filed by IAMAI, which is like the Internet and Mobile Association of India, and WazirX is a part of that. We are, fighting the case indirectly through this organization, us and a few other exchanges.
Yep.
It's been going on for about, I think, 18 months now. Since July 2018 or June 2018 is when this started, and about a month ago, the final hearing was completely done. I think the lawyers from our end gave some really strong arguments around why crypto should not be banned, or why banking. In fact, it's not about crypto, sorry. It's more about why banking restrictions is incorrect to the crypto ecosystem in India. And now we are waiting for the judgment to come in. If the judgment comes in favor of lifting the banking restriction, I think that'll be like a watershed movement for crypto in India, because then tons of people can come in faster into the ecosystem. You don't need to worry too much about a FUD or anything after that. If not, then the status quo is maintained, which means we have to keep fighting this FUD of Bitcoin banned in India and stuff. And we have to get people to continue using P2P, WazirX P2P, which is amazing for them. But yeah, it's just harder with the banking restriction, I would say. So we are hoping that the banking restriction is lifted. It just clears all the misinformation in the country.
Yeah, that's something pretty telling in two ways. One is any other country, a regulator comes out with something, that's the law. Whereas in India, the regulator comes out with something, as an industry, you can actually go and take them to court. I think that speaks a lot about, I think the rule of law in India in general, which is something that I'm actually pretty amazed by.
Oh yeah, I think it's a good thing, to be in this situation where regulators can put their point of view and the industry can put its point of view. I think the advantage is the fact that crypto is such a new thing that none of the regulators can actually stake a claim to it exclusively. So, which, this confusion helps in ensuring that the technology gets its time to breathe, and the right kind of laws can be formed eventually. But yeah, I think we've been able to do this in India, where we said that the banking restriction is not really a right thing to do. And let's see, I think we'll know soon what the Supreme Court of India thinks about this.
Is there an expected date when the Supreme Court will be announcing the decision?
They haven't really come up with a date yet, but we're hoping it happens probably this month or the next. But yeah, they've not given a tentative date yet.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your time. Anything else you want to talk about?
I think in general, we've covered a lot of things. One of the things we've not covered, which probably I want to put across, is the whole, we spoke about the Binance acquisition of WazirX, but, I think I want people to know what that has brought in for us, which especially in India, where it's a nascent market right now and it's beginning to grow. Getting the support of the Binance ecosystem has helped the Indian ecosystem a lot in terms of, I would say, while there's technological know-how, there's more exposure and all, but I think the positiveness that this brought, you should have seen the kind of tweets and stuff people was putting out when we announced in November the acquisition, and a lot of people told me that they're now much more positive about crypto in India. So I think the biggest outcome of this in India has been like the positivity. which has come in the crypto space. I think that's something that would have never happened if we hadn't built WazirX, if we hadn't gotten acquired, if we hadn't partnered with Binance. I think for the ecosystem, this was a much needed push, I think, in the right direction. Yeah, I think I wanted to put this across to anyone listening and wanting to understand how India is as a market. It's in a very positive mood right now, I think.
Okay, great. Well, Nischal, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing, at least for me, seeing you personally more, and also I think looking to see some really cool products and features and some of the stuff that we're going to do together. Hey everyone, this is Wei. So we have a couple of updates here. So we were actually going to release the podcast that I had done with Nischal on yesterday. But a big news came out yesterday about the ruling with the Supreme Court in India that basically overturned a previous Reserve Bank of India Central Bank's ban on cryptocurrencies, especially in terms of banning financial institutions in India, especially banks, in terms of banking with businesses from the cryptocurrency industry. With this huge and momentous sort of decision by the Supreme Court in India, I actually wanted to bring Nischal back and do a quick wrap up or a quick catch up about the impact. So Nischal, thanks for taking the time to jump on. I'm sure you haven't slept at all in the last 48 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a crazy time now ever since the report came out. I would state that this is like one of the most historic moments for crypto in India. Something at this scale has never happened. The RBI ban came in April 2018, and we've been fighting this case in the Supreme Court ever since. Apart from this, we've been rallying on Twitter with the India Wants Crypto campaign. So it's an amazing movement for India in terms of all the hard work has now given its results in a very positive way. We saw some massive user base activation after this.
Because I think we talked a little bit about it last time. Can you tell me who are the people that's behind this case? And because I remember the hearing was in front of the Supreme Court was about a month and a half ago, right? Who are the individuals that basically argued the case? And then what was sort of like some of the key points that they made that you think that convinced the Supreme Court to reverse basically a central banking decision?
So this the case was filed by IAMAI, which is the Internet and Mobile Association of India, and WazirX is a part of that, along with a few other exchanges. It started with about 5 to 6 exchanges, and down the line, because of the whole conditions, a few exchanges had to shut down. But we continued, we persisted. The case was being there's NDA, which is Nischal Desai and Associates. They're part of the law firm handling this. But the lawyer in question who made the arguments was Mr. Ashim Sood. And he had some really amazing arguments against the RBI circular, which actually helped us win this case. So these are two important. One is Nischal Desai and Associates, which is a law firm, and Mr. Ashim Sood, who's the lawyer who actually fought this case for the whole crypto ecosystem in India.
In terms of the decision, what are some of the immediate? Because I think the immediate impact, then, basically, I mean, from the outside, it seemed like banking. You can basically now connect with banking institutions now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So now we do not have to worry about whether banks will allow us. In fact, what has happened is funny. We've gotten at least 10 to 15 calls from various banks and fintech institutes. Every payment processor in the country has started calling up saying they would want to partner. So we've gone from everyone running away and not replying to now everyone calling us up directly to integrate. So yeah, it's a great turn of events.
Yeah, and then because I remember I saw your Twitter, like you and I haven't talked live since the decision yesterday. Yeah, I saw you on Twitter that like the whole WazirX office all cheered. You guys were all just super excited when they.
Yeah, it's like we want to get out the whole banking integration, make it live so that we can accept deposits and withdrawals. And the team is they just don't want to sleep. They want to get this done first. So yeah, I was like, great. No need to push anyone.
So completely self-motivated. This is something that you can, they can go home and tell their family about, right? They're part of this process that was extremely, I think, painful and long for the last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of them even got sweets into the office saying, the hard times of banking is over. That's why he just wanted to distribute sweets in the office. So, it's crazy.
And I think from a product perspective, how quickly can WazirX get integrated with the banks?
We're probably going live today with the deposits.
Oh, wow.
So really fast. And by next week, we intend to bring in instant deposits and withdrawals. Right now, the deposits might take 15 to 20 minutes or 30 minutes max, but we want to do it instant. So we have a few other players we've speaking to. In fact, we've already started those integrations as well. So I think in the next 5 to 10 days, things should be where you can instantly deposit and withdraw anytime your INR from WazirX.
And WazirX has a wallet that's shared with Binance as well, right? That product was released 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if people want to deposit their INR and instantly start trading crypto to crypto trading, they can just convert it into USDT and just move it to Binance and start trading. It's so seamless, and they don't have to this is usually the way where people use fiat exchanges, eventually go to Binance for heavy duty trading. Now here they can just do it on the Binance properties itself, which is WazirX and Binance. So yeah, very seamless now.
Okay. All right. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just wanted to add a quick reaction from sort of on the ground and from the company that's in the middle of it all. So again, thank you everyone for listening to the Binance podcast. And then thank you, Nischal, and for the great work that you and your team have done over the last 2 years in terms of helping the community and then also supporting the cause. Thank you, brother. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. If you like this show, please share this episode on Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, WeChat, or any other social media platforms. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Binance podcast, and see you next time.